June and July for NIH. I recognize that many of those may have included a foreign site within those projects. I don't anticipate getting any additional guidance from NIH prior to at least the June deadline, and I would imagine the July deadline as well. So if you do have program staff that you're working with at NIH, you may want to start talking with them now to think about what scenarios could be in place. It's difficult to say on whether or not, if we were to submit something as per normal, NIH is going to have the ability to sort of pivot for those applications sort of mid-review or what they may be able to effectuate when it comes to those. Some of these will have to look like seriously case by case. But if you do have questions on proposals that you are planning, if you haven't already reached out to SPA, please do so as soon as you can. As I mentioned before too, there have been a limited number of NIH POs that have already started to reach out to us, and in many cases, they're still interpreting the policy guidance. So for the time being, at least, between us, our peers, and NIH, we're really trying to work through these scenarios as best as we can to sort of contemplate how awards could be restructured. Those are the three updates that I wanted to give. I know there are probably a lot of questions on specific scenarios, but I'll pause here and shift to Jeanette to be able to cover her areas as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions too.
Thank you, Bill. And please, everyone in the audience, do put your questions in Q&A. And I hope that actually some of the points that Bill made, especially in the first topic, answers many of the questions that came in through registration and many of the questions that many of you have asked me and Bill and others in the EVPR's office. So now I'd like to talk about the Research Stabilization Fund. And I wanted, again, anticipating or actually knowing what some of your questions are, I want to kind of frame my my discussion of the fund in terms of answering some questions. So the first is, what is the intention of the fund? The purpose of the fund is to provide short-term support for faculty and researchers to stabilize their research programs. And we expect about 4 different kinds of uses of this fund, and I'll just go through each one of them one by one. The first is to pivot your research agenda. So if you're working on something now, and for whatever reason, you think it's best to pivot your research toward a new direction, then the Research Stabilization Fund can give you the time and resources needed to pivot. So pivoting means working on something new, something different from what you're doing now. The second expected use is to bridge your current research program. So the Research Stabilization Fund can give you the time to seek alternative sources of funding that is different from your current or past funding source. And by alternative, I don't just mean another federal funding agency, which is of course fine, but also industry, foundations, nonprofits, and private donors, and so on. Bridging means continuing to work on what you're doing now, but anticipating a need to make up for lost or reduced funding from your current source. The third expected use is to complete the last mile of your research program. So the Research Stabilization Fund can give you the resources needed to, say, finish the data collection for your work, or to do the final analysis needed to submit your work for publication. And finally, the Research Stabilization Fund is there to help likely partially support core facilities or services that in turn support the broader community. Now, there may be other uses you can think of, and the application form provides space for you to tell us what they may be. And I should emphasize that the intention of these funds is that an award will typically go to support a graduate student or postdoc or technical staff member who can help the PI in one or more of the expected uses I just mentioned. So that's the intention of the fund. Now, what about some mechanics and logistics? Who may apply? How much can I ask for? When is the deadline? And I wanted to mention why there are 2 funds, which was mentioned in Acting President Claire Shipman's message. Okay, 1 application per PI. That might change in the future, but for now, we're restricting 1 application per PI. And only PI eligible people may apply. But yes, as for other funding opportunities, you may request a PI waiver, and my office handles PI waivers. Please note, any PI eligible researcher can apply, not just those who are PIs on a terminated award. Let me repeat that. Any PI eligible researcher can apply, not just those who are PIs on a terminated award. And the rationale behind that is actually the schools are very interested in knowing what are the researchers and the faculty's interests moving ahead as external constraints are on us, but also as researchers rethink the research agenda. Each award will be up to a max of $100,000 to be spent within 12 months. So the short term is 12 months, and there's a max. Now, there are currently 2 application windows. The first application deadline is Wednesday, June 4th. The second is Wednesday, September 3rd. We may have more rounds depending on demand and availability of funds. So now I want to speak about the 2 pots of money. There are 2 pots of money, one for VP&S and one for all the other schools. The reason there are 2 pots of money is that the one for VP&S includes money from the hospital, New York Presbyterian, and they specifically want to help VP&S. The university is putting resources into both pots of money. And I think it's important to keep in mind that there are these 2 pots of money, but the administration of applying for up to 100K, et cetera, there's just one application process, and my office, through the Office for Research Initiatives and Development, will handle all the applications. So now I want to address the review process, and I'm going to go step by step, starting with you submitting an application. So first, you fill out an application on the website. So this has all been posted on Friday. Maybe someone could put in the chat the link. My office, through the Office for Research Initiatives and Development, put together the website and the application form Friday. It's a standard form used similarly as for other internal grants programs and administered similarly as for other limited submissions. Next, my team will bucket all the applications by school and then distribute to each school its set of applications. Then the school prioritizes its set of applications based on its own review criteria and its own review process. It's critical that we really want to put into the hands of each of the schools the ability to prioritize what activity is important, what research activity is important for that school. It's really up to the school, and all the schools are in different places. Research is different in each school with respect to the rest of the school's portfolio. Now, each school that has already had terminated awards has already gone through an extensive prioritization process based on the Research Action Plan, the RAP process that affected PIs, the affected PIs filled out. And so we do encourage the schools to leverage that process and the guidelines that they used in that prioritization. So it's not starting from scratch. Then, after each school finishes its prioritization, The rank ordering goes to a university level committee. Now, given that there are two pots of money, I want to be a little clear about this. There are also two committees. One committee for VP&S, for the VP&S pot of money, which is led by VP&S Dean Jim McKiernan, and one for all the other schools, led by Provost Angela Olinto. Each of these committees will look at the prioritization provided by VP&S in the first case, by all the other schools on the second, and make recommendations to the VP&S Dean and the Provost respectively. So Jim for VP&S, Angela for all the other schools, and they are the people who make the final decisions. Now, before we open up for questions, I also wanted to point out some other resources that my office, again through ORID, led by Sharon Sputz, is providing. Just three I want to mention. First, we are providing some cost matching for undergraduate researchers for this summer and next summer. You may request up to $3,000 per student. And my office, actually through Erica Peterson's Office for Postdoctoral Affairs and Early Career Researchers, also runs an undergraduate research opportunities platform where faculty and students can find each other. There's an application form already on the website that you, and thank you Sharon for putting that out there, that you can, so you can already start requesting money for undergraduates. The second, again run by Sharon Sputz, is a proposal writing working group. Members of this group include grants development staff from all the research intensive schools, and they meet weekly. They share best practices on how to position or frame your work in this day and age, what to write in broader impacts, what to put in your bio sketch, some nitty gritty nuts and bolts. The last thing I want to mention is about partnerships. As we think about the federal funding agencies' budgets possibly shrinking, and thus federal funding for research possibly shrinking or likely to shrink, Sharon and I have focused ORID's efforts on strengthening existing and building new partnerships, including with government labs like Brookhaven and Fermilab, industry, foundations, nonprofits, and the city and state government. We are especially focused on making it easier to do the negotiations for contracts and agreements, including those with industry. So we recognize that some things can be streamlined and expedited, and we're working on that. The last thing I'll say about Sharon's office and looking for alternative sources of funding, and actually as related to the Research Stabilization Fund, is we are exploring the use of AI to better match your interests with opportunities. And so another reason we're opening the Research Stabilization Fund to any PI eligible person is that you're going to tell us what your interests are, and that we will have a body of knowledge that we can use to help, for us to help draw connections across the university, but also for us to look for opportunities to help you. Okay, so why don't we open up for Q&A?